hear me? Recording in progress. Okay, so I'm Zuhura, and I'm the campaign director of Oxfordshire Livable Streets. Some of you I know, I definitely recognise a few faces, and some of you won't know me so well. I'm going to give a presentation about the Central Oxfordshire Travel Plan. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen now. And can everybody see this? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so this is the Central Oxfordshire Travel Plan. So as the title says, it's what I've found out recently and what I'm kind of in. Can everybody hear me? I've got some kind of slightly interrupted noise. Yes, is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay,
I think it's okay.
Okay, I think it was just somebody. So, and I'm from Oxfordshire Livable Streets, and so we are a campaigning organisation. I'm assuming that most of you will know OLS, but we very much like Cyclox, we're a member of COSAT, and we campaign for livable streets in a much broader sense than just cycling, but also pedestrians, also public transport, also kind of livability. We started off with the LTNs in East Oxford, but now are kind of broadening out a lot more. And I joined OLS in October last year, so about 6 months ago. And you might be interested to know that we are funded by something called the Foundation for Integrated Transport. So I am actually employed, which is really nice, by OLS instead of doing everything voluntarily. And what I'm going to do is run through the Central Oxfordshire Travel Plan. I'm very aware that this audience is probably very knowledgeable, and you will know probably a fair amount of it. I hope that I'm not teaching grandmothers to suck eggs, but there should be stuff that you don't know, or things that you know, details you don't know, and it might be helpful even if you know it to kind of see it all laid out. So that's what I'm hoping. None of this is sort of confidential. I don't have I'm not so in that I have the ear of the councillors and I'm getting confidential information, but I am going to be fairly honest about what like vulnerabilities that I see and political dynamics and things like that. So I would definitely ask you to, I want you to share the information that we talk about in the call, but just be kind of wise and thoughtful about how you share it. So instead of being like, well, the workplace parking levy is dead in the water, we don't want that kind of talk going around at all, because that will only deaden it in the water. So just kind of be wise about how you talk about it and how you share this information. And I won't be posting it on social media, for example, and things like this. And then questions, I can't see any of you when I'm sharing my screen, so it's probably best we don't do questions, because then I can keep my flow and then we can keep going. So first off, this is the area of the Central Oxfordshire Travel Plan. It's a big plan. It contains 21 measures, which place us on a really good, strong route to a low traffic Oxford. The measures are quite different. So one of the measures, for example, is like a whole new branch line, railway line, and one of them is about relatively small parking changes. So it's a kind of weird mixture of scales within the measures. But it is important to remember there are 21 other measures. We only hear about the three: the traffic filters, the ZEZ, and the workplace parking levy, but there's lots of other ones. And the plan was unanimously passed by Cabinet on the 29th of November. So the whole plan has been passed. And then the traffic filters in particular had like an extra vote. And that was voted 9-1 by Cabinet on the same day. And OLS has essentially kind of tied ourselves to the COPT mast. We think it's the best chance of getting a low traffic Oxford. It's been passed. It exists as a plan. So we're not kind of campaigning to change the plan radically, although we would like it to be done more creatively, more challenging, faster, all of those things. But we're not kind of campaigning for something like a congestion charge or something like that now. And we definitely believe it needs protection and support. I think there's a good chance that some of it might not happen unless we really try and help it to happen. So yeah, it's by no means a done deal at all. This is not just about Oxford. So one of the really important things to remember is that it feels like it's just us, but there's lots and lots of other cities around the country doing things. Again, I'm sure a lot of you will know this, but Cambridge have a kind of a congestion charge with income related reductions. So they've kind of gone for like a slightly different model to the traffic filters, which is and then Bath are thinking of things, Canterbury are thinking of a similar system to the traffic filters. Birmingham, I'm not that familiar with what their plans are, but there are other things. And so this feels very personal, it's very much about our city, but other local authorities are watching. So this has national significance. And I counted up the number of cities and towns around the country that have the sort of population of Oxford, and it's about 6 million people. And so if we make a success of it here in Oxford, then it could become like known as, the Oxford Plan, and other local authorities will copy. So it's really important to remember that like it does have much broader significance. I'm assuming this map is very familiar to most of you. Well, the map itself won't be because I drew it, but the contents of the map should be quite familiar to a lot of you. So the pink dots and the pink, bright pink, is where the traffic filters are going to be. The dark blue dotty bit and the pale blue ZEZ, that's the ZEZ expansion zone. And then the orange outline is the workplace parking levy boundary. There's another boundary on here, which I haven't drawn, which is the boundary of the 100 permits. And that kind of essentially follows the workplace parking levy boundary, but it goes further into Littlemore, Rose Hill, Botley, and around Barton, and it has like more wiggly bits, and it's a larger area. And I'm going to talk you through all three of these measures for the moment. These are known as these are the congestion management measures in the Central Oxfordshire Travel Plan. So the traffic filters are the ones you probably know the most about. They will probably happen at the end of 2024. I'm going to talk in a minute about the timing of them and the bridge and the election. They are an ETRO, so an experimental traffic reduction order. I'm also going to go through an ETRO next in detail in the next slide. I think the traffic filters are very good. I think they are very fair. They allow for people who need to drive, such as blue badge holders, carers, health workers, and operative journeys. There's a lot of people who cars are very useful for. But because they are very fair, they are very complicated. So my main concern, and I know a lot of the councillors' main concerns, is the complications of running the back end, the number of exemptions, how they're going to manage some of the exemptions, like short-term mobility problems. Are people going to send in pictures of their sprained ankles to council officers to get a pass? I mean, some of them I really don't know. And so they're good, but that comes with a price, I suppose is what I'm saying. So there's 6 filters. They're ANPR, automatic number plate recognition cameras. If you live within that orange boundary, well, the boundary I didn't show, you get 100 free passes every year. And if you live outside of the boundary, then it's 25 free passes in the county of Oxford. I'm really trying to change the language around the traffic filters. So instead of saying permits, I'm saying free passes all the time. And you are very welcome to join me in this change of language, because I think it's really important that permits sounds really negative and like you're permitted to do something, and it sounds very statist and all the things that the critics say. Whereas these are free passes. So you don't have to pay for them. That's a really, really important thing. We're not doing a congestion charge. So I'm trying to emphasize that with the language. And the 100 free passes are a lot. I think it's a ridiculous number. But I do think that I'm glad that it passed, like the policy passed. And I think that reducing the number of passes is something that we can work on in time. It is also because they are slightly concerned about how it is going to work. And one of the vulnerabilities is that if the traffic filters, if people don't shift, like if there's not modal shift and everyone drives around the ring road, then one of the things that could happen is that the A34 gets very blocked up, and national highways will step in and could stop the traffic filter ETRO, because so they need to have quite a lot of free passes in order for people to actually keep moving through the city to a certain extent and not use the ring road all the time. So they are definitely like trying things out with this. It is an experiment in the true sense of the word. The fines for if you go through the traffic filters when you've used up all your free passes is £35 if you pay within 2 weeks, or £70 if you spend longer than 2 weeks to pay. The reason we are doing this, and the thing that if you take one thing away when you talk to people about the traffic filters, it is for fast buses. This is the main reason we're doing it. We're expecting that the bus speeds will go up by at least 10%. and it's written into the enhanced partnership, the bus service improvement plan, which is like the enhanced partnership thing, and the zebra funding. So this is the electric buses. So we have 159 electric buses which are coming as a result of the traffic filters. And it will mean serious traffic reduction. I think on the outer edges it might be more like 10-20%, but I think on the inner parts of Oxford it might be at times 75%, like massive reduction. It'll obviously vary at times of day and things like that, how much you're reducing, but it's the thing that will allow for us to reach Vision Zero. So, you know, we can do junction redesign when there's traffic reduction. This is key, absolutely, like cornerstone to achieving Vision Zero. And then with the traffic filters, they are a mechanism that we want people to obey. So it doesn't raise a lot of revenue. It will probably raise like a little bit, but with the fines, it will probably just cover its own costs, because there's a lot of costs at the back end of running it. So it's not a revenue raising measure, unlike the ZEZ and the workplace parking levy. So I think some targets, and this is really important for Cyclox to hear as well. So there's a loophole about vans, which I'm really worried about. So all vans have an automatic exemption. They don't have to be registered to a business. And I've anecdotally heard a lot of people who are just going to swap their car for a van, and then they can just drive all over with impunity. And I don't know how they're going to get around that. And then the second one is HGV exemption. So HGVs are currently exempt. To my mind, this is madness, and we should absolutely have a shared campaign to reduce HGV hours in the city, like very limited. And the ANPR cameras should be used to reduce HGV access to the city, not have them exempt. So that should be, I think that in my mind, that should be like a shared Cyclox OLS campaign in the near future. And the number of passes, as I said before, they do have to see how it goes, but I think in time they can bring the number of passes down. Probably the traffic filters will happen now. I mean, even if there is an election, and even if the Conservatives got back in, I think the chances of them happening are very high, because they are written into the bus service improvement plan and the zebra funding. And I think the bus companies would have a lot to say if they didn't happen. Really hoping I'm not going to get a tickly throat. I can feel it coming on. This is the ETRO process. So this is my very well drawn diagram. I thought you might like to know why the traffic filters are what they are at an ETRO, and it links into the bridge. So what happens is you have an ETRO can last for 18 months, and you have to make it permanent very soon after the end of the ETRO. I don't know exactly when, but you can't like leave it for 6 months and then make it permanent. And so because you have to make it permanent very quickly at the end, you have to make sure all your data and your modelling and your report writing is kind of all ready by the end of the trial. So a few months into the end of the trial, you are starting to do that work. And so you need a good 6 months break. So that's the report writing is the red line right at the end. I'm working backwards from the 18 months from making it permanent. That is probably 2-3 months. And then you've got this green line, this green straight line, where you need like a clear run of data basically to prove that your thing works. So you can't make any changes in that time. But before that time, you've got a chance to make changes, because this is an experimental traffic reduction. So I would say in the first few months, the blue lines at the beginning, they can just see how it works and what happens. And then there's a chance to really make a change. And then there's a chance to maybe quickly make another change, but not very much of a change. And then they have to allow like a good 6 month run. So that's kind of the process of the ETRO. And I think that change will be turning the filters, which are currently not 7 till 7, into 7 till 7. My understanding is that officers think that the modelling means that they will build up a lot of traffic on the Marston Ferry roads and around Holloway, and people will wait until after 10 o'clock, and it's much better if they're all the same for complexity reasons. So they might make the change there. They might be able to make some other changes. They might be able to reduce the number of exemptions which are hard to manage, for example, that kind of stuff. So that, anyway, they can make one set of changes at that point, but then they have to have this big green line where they can't make any changes. And So this is the infamous bridge. So one of the questions I got asked a lot was, are the council delaying the traffic filters? Are they like just playing silly buggers or delaying? And the answer with this bridge, why can't we have the traffic filters while the bridge is going on? And I know for an absolute fact they're not. Like, they desperately didn't want this bridge thing to happen, and didn't want the bridge to stop the traffic filters. So Andrew Gant, the highways officer, pushed for the 1 year plan, so the bridge closed for 1 whole year in order to speed it up massively. Network Rail went to him with the 2 year plan, the 6 months, and he said, no, go in, come up with another plan. And they did, and they announced it, and then they were like, oh, we can't actually do that one. And the main reason for doing that was to make sure the traffic filters happen sooner. So I know it's definitely not like of their choosing. And then the other thing is that they really can't do the traffic filters while the bridge is closed. It just completely changes the experiment. It's a major road. You won't have all the exemptions. You won't be able to drive to certain parts of the city without using a pass, which is one of the key points of the plan. And it would change the data too much. We'd leave it open to legal challenge, and it wouldn't be a fair experiment because the Botley Road being open is a key part of it working. So yeah, just to like lay that to rest in case anyone is wondering if that's the case. I also know that they would never have chosen to delay because they are that arrow is the current administration. They are now in a really tricky position, and I don't envy them at all. So what now happens because of the bridge, it means they can bring in the traffic filters at the end of 2024, so autumn 2024, and it'll be about 8 to 9 months before the elections, the county council elections in May 25, and they can fight the election with the teething problems, which there definitely will be when the traffic filters are brought in, with all of the negative headlines, which there will be, but the reality, so a lot of people will also be like, oh, this isn't actually that bad, or they can wait until after the elections and bring the traffic filters in then and hope they win the next election, and fight the election with the threat of the traffic filters hanging over everyone's heads. So I think that, and I've heard very strongly from both Duncan and Andrew, that they're absolutely going to bring them in as soon as possible. They think it's better to fight an election with the reality in place when people see, oh, okay, it's not the end of the world, than the threat of them. So my understanding is they want to bring them in as soon as possible, but it all does depend on Network Rail's timeline. But Network Rail does have to finish that bridge really quickly because their funding from the DfT is also dependent on, like, their broader scheme that they've got. They do have to finish that bridge really quickly. So hopefully it will be relatively on time. They will bring the traffic filters in, and then they will win the elections in May 2025. Okay, so that's the traffic filters and the bridge all kind of covered. This is the ZEZ expansion, so the Zero Emission Zone. Again, you probably know about it. It's a few tiny streets in the centre of Oxford at the moment. It is an air pollution measure and a revenue raising measure, and it will also cut congestion to a certain extent. It is an initiative that we in some ways want people to break, as in we want people to still drive in to a certain extent and pay. It will really mean that we have a beautiful city centre. So I think it will be be fantastic for Oxford in the long term. And what it really drives is innovation in deliveries and freight. So we have so many delivery vans driving around, like enormous diesel vans for like relatively small deliveries. And the ZEZ will really change that. At the moment, the charges are about £4 to £10. So it's £4, for example, for a small petrol car. It's about £10 for a larger diesel vehicle, and it will double in 2025. So that's quite significant, 20 quid. But that is for a larger diesel vehicle. So that is likely to be a commercial delivery of beer to a pub, for example, and they can just pay £20. That's fine. The Westgate is included, thank goodness. And you might also be interested to know it's raised about £600,000 so far between in 9 months or so, about half fines and half in payments. I haven't been able to find out any projections about what they're expecting to raise from the much larger area, My guess is like quite a lot more, because it's currently tiny and it's raised that much. But also, as it gets larger, it'll become more well known. And I think at the moment it's actually just not very well known, and so people drive in and don't realise what they've driven into. So it's a bit difficult to tell. It is the least opposed publicly. So OLS did some YouGov polling of some of the measures, the traffic filters, the ZEZ and the LTNs, and they were all quite popular, surprisingly popular. But this was the least opposed. And I think it's probably because it's just really simple. Like, you pay and you can drive. That's it. And it's a bit like a congestion charge in most people's minds. And so I think it's the most understood. And I think that's one of the problems with the traffic filters, is that like people literally just don't understand them. And then it is a joint city and county initiative. So they share the revenue, and I think they share some of the setup costs, and they sort of share the workload and things like that. Our targets, so these are sort of advocacy targets, is to make sure it happens. So it's at the moment billed for 2025. Make sure that Westgate is in it. The map doesn't change. And my dream, but this is probably not going to happen, but I'll just share it anyway, is that it's not based on electric, non-electric. It's based on the curbside weight of the vehicle. So curbside weight is the thing I hate most in the world. It's 4x4s, because they are just so horrific for so many things, and they tear up the roads. They're more likely to kill people if they hit them. The greenhouse gases, like embedded greenhouse gases in manufacturing, goes up the heavier the vehicle, all kinds of things. And curbside weight is a really good proxy for all of those costs to society. And so I would love to see a curbside weight model. It's really unlikely, but I want to keep planting the seed. And yeah, that's it on the ZEZ, I think, for the moment. And then the last one is the workplace parking levy. So for me, this is the kind of jewel in the crown of the three measures. Again, I think it's very equitable. I think it's very fair. So this is a fee, like a tax, like a levy, paid to the county council by employers or employees, but it's places of employment, and it's £660 for every car parking space after the 10th car parking space. So if you're a relatively small business and you only have 10 car parking spaces, you don't pay anything. There's only one successful introduction in the country, and that is Nottingham. And it took a decade to get it in. So that's just to give you a bit of a kind of reality check as to how long it takes. But Nottingham had to do a lot of work to translate the legislation from Westminster into something that worked for local governments, and that work has to an extent been done. So it might be a bit quicker, but there are some really cautionary tales with this. So Leicester recently tried to bring in the workplace parking levy, and it completely failed. There's a lot of they're very sore about it, Leicester County Council. And some very, very burnt fingers. So I could give you a long old set of things of what happened and things that Leicester didn't do very well. But the two really, really, really key things is that they didn't have a very strong vision of what the workplace parking levy was going to pay for. So Nottingham had a very simple vision, which was you'll get trams as a result of the workplace parking levy. And so you have to think about these awful 3-word slogans that Dominic Cummings was so good at, but I think you have to put what you're going to gain into 3 words. And Leicester had a whole bunch of things. It's like a bit of active travel. It was a bit of this. It was a bit of a bit of bus subsidy. It was a bit of you just couldn't explain it. And there was a lot of organising against it. They weren't that good in the communications. And it was basically very quickly targeted. There was a very strong narrative by the antis, which we're already seeing here from Richard Barnum and co, that you're taxing nurses and teachers to go to work. And the schools and the hospitals are going to be by far the hardest institutions to persuade of the workplace parking levy. There's not actually that many big employers in Oxford, so each college is treated separately, and the university is obviously very big universities, but they don't actually have tons and tons of parking space. The ones that have got the most amount of parking space is obviously the health trusts, and the hospitals can be made exempt. So Nottingham made their hospitals exempt. So they just didn't fight that battle because they had other big employers, whereas Oxford doesn't really have that many others that are inside the area. And so if the hospitals are not included, there's not that much point in doing workplace parking levy. It won't raise what we think, and it also won't cut congestion to the extent that we think. However, we can just exempt hospitals, it's possible. But what we can't do is exempt schools. So schools are specifically named as places of employment in the workplace parking legislation. And teachers brought down the workplace parking levy in Leicester. So teachers really like not living near the school, which is understandable because you don't want to bump into the parents in the pub at the Friday night. And they also carry quite a lot of stuff. And so teachers drive. It's really a strong cultural thing. And they did not want to pay for workplace parking levy. The schools didn't want to pay. And so what happened in Leicester is that the education unions, I think it was Unison or Unite, I don't quote me on which union it was, told Leicester City Council, the Labour Party, that they wouldn't give them any more money. The unions wouldn't give them any more money if they did the workplace parking levy. And that was the end of that. So we really have to engage the unions and schools early on with the workplace parking levy. And I can talk a little bit about OLS tactics, if you like, at the end. I haven't got any slides on that. The only thing that I can see, which is a kind of positive, is that if the hospital sorts out their parking and rationalises it and reduces the number of people driving and kind of just organises it better so that, night shift parking is closer to the hospital, does all that kind of stuff, that the sorts of work that the workplace parking levy would make them do, they might have some land, and that land will be very, very valuable for either selling or for medical purposes. And so that's one of the positive things I think people can understand. But I'm just inferring that, like, I don't know that that's going to be the way we're going to get it in the hospitals. It does need Secretary of State sign off, so it has a really long time frame. It has to go to Westminster to get time signed off. I don't think it'll be going before the next general election. I would be surprised. But the good thing about the workplace parking levy is that it raises a lot of revenue. So it raises £4 million a year, and that's when you get proper good stuff. So bus subsidies, we could turn the hospital into a proper transport hub. You could do shuttle services. You could give every nurse an electric bike. I mean, you can do like proper things for £4 million a year. And also the county council can start to raise money off the back of that income once the business plan is in place. But they can't until that business plan is in place. I also think I didn't talk about why I think it's equitable. I think it is really equitable because I think conversations can be had within workplaces about who needs to drive. The NHS, the health trusts have a lot of information about where their staff live and who comes from where. And you can charge, a consultant 5 times what you charge a healthcare assistant, or you can make sure that night shift workers always have car parking spaces, but like 9-to-5ers don't, so you can do different things, and you can organise it in a much better way than the county council coming and doing some kind of flat rate thing. So that's why I think it's actually really good and really reasonable. Our targets are to help make it happen. This is the one that I think is most unlikely to happen. Make sure hospitals are included and make sure the revenue that's raised is put to good use. I mean, I think overall, when I say help make it happen, I mean, it is that narrative. It is that, like, this is not just taxing nurses and teachers. It's going to be a really hard PR battle. If we think the traffic filters are controversial, just wait until we have the workplace parking levy. I just wanted to kind of remind you, I think you probably all know this, but the county council are operating in what I think is a really hard environment. Working as a coalition is really hard. I've got this picture of people herding cats. Like, the different parties do have different feelings and emphasis and find different things more or less difficult. They have got, absolute eye-watering cuts that even Jeremy Hunt calls them eye-watering, so therefore they're probably pretty awful. And also they're relatively new as an administration, and I know we see it sometimes as like, I wish these things had happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But actually, and of course they should have happened 20 or 30 years ago, we shouldn't be so car dependent, and but the administration itself is relatively, like, it's only just turned 2 years old, and turning around the ship the size of like a £1 billion organisation is really, really tough. So I do have like a lot of sympathy, and they have massive recruitment and retention problems. My understanding. And then, of course, on top of that, we have the permanent barrage from the Oxford Mail of just totally unfair, untrue stories that seem to be, frankly, lies at times, which is, morale sapping for everybody. So this is a very funny picture of what I think of as sort of our role. And when I say our, I mean like people who want to see these things happen, who are not in the county council, and people in sort of active travel movement. So this digger is this like enormous tunnel digger. And I think it's from like Eurotunnel or something like that. And that's, I hope very much, and I've been told this is what it's like, is that's the council officers. So they are heads down, don't look at social media, don't look at the Oxford Mail, get on with providing the plan, like blinkers on. So they're kind of in the tunnel, like digging away. And they're quite hard to start, they're quite hard to stop, they're quite hard to change direction, like they will do this plan. But a small shift can make a very big difference like later on, if you think about the angles of like digging a tunnel. So that's kind of apparently what it's like, the culture is like down there. And then you've got the cabinet members and the councillors who are receiving all the flack. So they are the ones who have to do the media and have to do all the talking, have to receive the horrible things on social media, and have to permanently kind of like front it. And I feel like people who are involved in active travel can kind of help do things that the county council don't do very well. So they are not good at communication. They're not good at proactive, accessible comms, explaining to people the big vision and beauty of a low traffic Oxford and how everybody will get in, how it is equitable and how they're just not good at explaining it. And I don't think that's about to change. Like, I don't think we should, it comes back to that turning a big ship around, like culturally, institutionally, like historically, they're just not great at it. No local authority is. And I think it's like asking an elephant to climb a tree. Like, it's just not particularly in their nature to be super, super responsive and do good communication. So I think that there's a role for a kind of coalition of people like us to do good comms. And so I'm putting a lot of my energies into that kind of area. So if we can be like the cover for this sort of advancing army, that's kind of how I see OLS. And when I say OLS, I mean Cyclox and COSAT, and I mean all of the kind of active travel groups. So these are sort of some things coming up, vulnerabilities. So May next year, half of the city are up for election. It technically shouldn't matter because the city don't do transport, but it does matter because Labour are getting quite wobbly about active travel things after the Littlemore by-election results. And so if a few anti-LTN candidates won, it would just be such a drain. They would have so much time to talk, and it would be, even if they had no real power, I think it would be a real problem. So that's something to bear in mind for next year. And if you want to get involved in canvassing, and if you want to get involved in, I don't know if any of you are in political parties, but if you are, then something to bear in mind. And then May 2025, the entire county is up for election. And some people are thinking the Tories will never be back in again. Some people I speak to, they're like, the demographics have changed too much. It's a Remain county. The national picture is the Tories screwing up. They'll never get back in. I don't think that's true. I think there are 6 or 7 very vulnerable constituencies around Oxford with high car ownership. They're close to Oxford, so they have high dependency on Oxford. They only get 25 passes. For them, it feels like the barriers are coming down. I've had very uncomfortable conversations with various family friends in those ones, and they are Tory facing. So they're Lib Dem currently, but they're Tory facing. And I think that they're very vulnerable, and that would be enough to change the coalition. And the Tories are well and truly centering on this issue. So Liam Walker, as you probably know, is just going on about it absolutely constantly, and it's total electioneering. Whether they actually take them out or not is not necessarily an issue. I think they probably have to keep the traffic filters in now, but they could just kick the rest of it into the long grass, so we end up with like a half-baked thing. And they could also water it down a lot. I think that would be what happened. They'd probably get rid of Marston Ferry Road and Holloway Way, and they would just water them down bit by bit, I think. So it does really matter. So how you can help. What else have I got here? Oh yeah, okay. So you can sign our petition. Please sign our petition. It should have gone around in your Cyclox mailing list, but it's at that website address there. It's just a general broad petition at the moment to show there's appetite for traffic restrictions in the city. Please share our petition. I could also do with a few useful, kind of small number of useful people around me. If you have particular skills in particular areas, then I would really like to know. It's always good to just have a conversation before like trying to assign people. I haven't been very good at building up a little crowd around me to help me do stuff. I know you're members of Cyclox, so I don't need to poach, but if you want to become a member of OLS as well, you're very welcome. It's £20 a year. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and share our things. And then there's other things that you can do to help. So social media is always an area I get asked about. How much should you get involved? How much should you wade in on the, and generally speaking, I say don't, because you can't really change people's minds on social media. It's not the right forum. You need to have conversations and people need to see each other's eyes really to change minds. But what does work, and the best thing you can do, is really like what's called neutralizing social media posts. So you just put something that's like incredibly hard to argue with, not even necessarily addressing the points, and you just say, oh, I'm really happy, like, yeah, my daughter loves cycling, whatever, just something like that. And those are one of the few things that you apparently does work to some extent on social media posts. You can talk about the traffic. So if you do get into conversations with people, your hairdresser, people down the street, your neighbours, whatever, the most important messages, I think, for people who are not into active travel, is that we have made change before and most of us would never go back. So you can talk about core market, you can talk about cars up the high street. And so you're painting this as a picture of continuity. So we've always limited cars in Oxford and it has worked. And, you wouldn't go back to cars going down core market, would you? And so people tend to be able to like zoom out from the like, my life is going to change. I'm not going to have to drive down that street. And you kind of zoom out in time, but you also kind of, it's continuity. Kids are one of the few messages that work for everybody. You talk about why it's great for them: independence, physical, mental health, time away from screens, all the things that people want children to do, play outside. You can point out how less traffic is good for that. And then there's another one, which is a sort of nostalgia type argument messaging, which probably might work for some people. It works for about a third of the population. Is that you sort of go back to like, oh, my granddad cycled 10 miles a day, kind of, this is how we used to be. You talk about balance, rebalancing away from cars. It's a bit like the continuity thing, but you're talking about finding balance again. That kind of works quite well. And you talk about kind of back in the olden days. So it's a good one. And then other ways you can help. So support counsellors. Morale is really low. So emails of encouragement go a very, very, very long way. This is city councillors or county councillors. If you just have like, I had a lovely cycle home and even if it's just, I brought my friends around Oxford, it was so nice to walk around without too many cars, like just really natural ones that aren't, pre-written things from people like us. They go a really long way, and I know that they get sent on to, if you send them to Andrew Gant, they get sent on to the council officers, and the council officers could also do with some morale boosting. So please do those, and promote and sort of explain and support this within the parties, especially if you're in the Labour Party, or join the Labour Party and promote and support and explain it. I am happy to come to branch meetings or come to presentations or do anything like that to kind of help with that. The other last thing you can do, which is really nice, and this might work for Cyclox again, is there's loads of cycling. We need to have people we need modal shift. We have to have get people cycling. So there's a desperate need for bikeability instructors. If you are someone who you think would be good at teaching a child or an adult to learn to ride a bike, if you've got good communication skills, you can go on a nice course and you can become a bikeability instructor. It is paid, but it's it's not onerous. It's a few hours a week or less, I don't know. And then there's lots of fantastic behaviour change work done by Laura and Annette, who you probably will hear about or know already. So supporting their work in any way or helping them out would be, I think, very, very useful. And there's obviously Broken Spoke and all of the Wheels for All and all of the other bike groups that you absolutely all know about. But yeah, volunteering at them and helping them as much as possible, or donating to them. But these are our little network of bike, like practical bike things, are going to be really important in the next 2 years, so people feel that they have an option when the traffic filters come in. And that's my last slide. So I managed to just about get through it without having a major coughing fit, and so I think I am back now. Okay, can everybody see me?
Yeah, well, gosh, Zuhura, that was tremendous. And I think partly getting it in context, and partly, as you say, describing the sort of timeline of it all. One point that I wonder if I might ask Simon Hunt is, and we were talking about it before we started, is it's a bit cart before the horse. They wouldn't do it this way if it wasn't the way the funding worked. And I wonder, Simon, would you like to put your point to the audience and see what Zuhura feels about how it might be ameliorated?
Hello, Zuhura. That was really tremendous. Was the chair of Cyclops previously, but things have moved on so much, and I think it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing in OLS and in conjunction with Cyclops. Brilliant. I often hear it said that the transition to a new regime, such as the three major ones you've been talking about, that will lead to traffic reduction, there needs to be in place, ideally before any of the reduction happens, the alternative which supports the change to cycling and walking and use of public transport. And I know that's so difficult to do, because in order to put it in, it costs, and there's a lot of disruption. And if it comes to public transport, for instance, you've got to have the buses and the bus services going for people to use. I think it's absolutely brilliant that we're going to have this very visible transition to electric buses. That is one particular item that's so good. But the general point is there any way in which the transfer can be eased and actually actively promoted by getting the new structures in place, synchronized with, or better still, before the change happens?
So it depends exactly what you're talking about here. I mean, there's different sort of elements of it. So funding wise, the council, it feels very sticky at the, like stick-like at the moment. It doesn't feel like there's any carrots. And I know this a lot, and I mean, I feel it myself. And until the ZEZ and the workplace parking levies business plans are in, the council can't take on any debt based on that income.
Sure.
They can't then pay for nice things. And there is a thing apparently within the offices, they see the traffic filters as a carrot. And I was like, okay, I think you're the only people in the city who see them as a carrot. Most people do not see them as a carrot. They see them very firmly in the stick category. But they're like, but you'll get fast buses. And so maybe when they're in, people who catch buses will definitely feel like they're maybe more like carrots. There's different, so yes, there's the funding revenue side of it, which I'm relatively clear they can't do it. There's the putting in all the sorts of infrastructure we need, like a decent footbridge over to the hospital, like doing lots of, I don't know, cycle modal shift stuff. I think we're going to have to mumble along and do it like as much as possible ourselves and get bits of funding and do it like that. I mean, with the support, with the general support of the council. I wish there was a way of doing things like getting everything ready and then doing it. But I also think there's no way, there's no perfect, like it's never going to happen. And also the only way you get people out of cars is to either make them more inconvenient or more expensive to drop. And you can do carrots and carrots and carrots and carrots. You guys know this. carrots until the cows come home, and you still will get people driving. And so I sort of think people are very inventive and adaptive. And while I do meet the occasional person with the traffic filters and I think, oh my God, your life is really going to change, not for the better when the traffic filters come in, like a single mum the other day I met, and I was like, but generally speaking, most people have an option in the city. And I think a lot of it is going to be around schools and parents talking to each other and sharing the school run. And I think the only way you're going to get people to do that is by putting the traffic filters in. There's no infrastructure that you could put in, short of literally leading someone to a bike and chaining them onto it. Like you have to put some sticks in place. So I don't think you have to do all of the nice stuff first. I think you can do them and let people adapt and muddle along, and then the carrots can come as well. Like, it's really hard. I do wish we could.
I mean, strategically, I think it is quite important to have some little, at least trickle in of the improvements as you're going along, and you can get them to hit the headlines for a couple of months, 3 months or so.
I do wish something. Yeah, I mean, even with the bridge and the Botley Road bridge, we're going to get a nice shiny new station, so everyone gets while we're doing it. Whereas with the traffic filters, people don't get it, and this message of faster buses is not getting through.
Sure.
Sadly.
Anyway, thanks. Yeah.
That is the trouble with realpolitik, isn't it? That nothing ever happens the way you'd like it to. I wonder if I could ask John Gillibo to go down into some of the elements that'll make this up. John, are you?
Yes, it was really just, I didn't catch a very quick thing you said, Zuhura. Thank you for your talk, by the way, which is wonderful. I knew quite a lot of it, but to put it all together, as you have, is wonderful. But what was it you were saying about the Marston Ferry Road? I hadn't heard that story.
So, you know that Marston Ferry Road and Hollow Way, the way that they got them to be passed was to change the timings on them.
What,
so they're
what
not
passed? What passed?
So to get the traffic filters to pass Cabinet,
I
they
see.
changed
For them to involve that bit of road.
Yeah, so the original Connecting Oxford plan was the 4 traffic filters in the centre, right. And then the Connecting Oxford Plus included the Marston Ferry Road and Hollow Way, because we realised there would be an enormous traffic block, basically from Cowley up to Port Meadow. If there wasn't past Marston Ferry Road and Hollow Way, it would just be a traffic block nightmare of all of Marston, all of East Oxford, basically. And then those 2 are the most unpopular filters.
Right.
And they were particularly unpopular with 2 particular cabinet members who represented areas of my constituencies around Marston Ferry Road and Hollow Way. And so they reached a kind of compromise where those 2 filters became, the other ones are 7 till 7, 7 days a week. And so for those 2, they made them 7 till 9:30 and then 3:30 to 6:30 or some other. You see, this is why it doesn't work. They made them shorter times so you could drive through them in the middle of the day. And this was really political. Like, it was just to get it through Cabinet. The officers were advising not to do this because they were saying that this will build up traffic in those areas in the middle of the day. People will wait until 10 o'clock or whatever it is to drive. But they just did it anyway because that was the only way they're going to get through them. And so one of the first changes that is anticipated, like that the officers would like to make, I mean, again, don't quote me, this is like inference, is that they will change those 2 filters back to what they wanted to do, which was 7 till 7.
Okay.
Is that the bit?
Yeah, that was what I wasn't clear about. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And Zuhura, I mean, it's so difficult to know what the time scale will be. As you say, they'll want to get it in as quickly as possible. What do you think, from a council point of view, apart from getting in to be re-elected, what do you think success will look like?
You mean for the filters?
Yeah, for the whole package.
Of the whole package. The whole package will be getting it done.
Well, you know, what are they wanting Oxford to look like in 3 years' time?
3 years' time. I mean, they've only really got the traffic filters in.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, I'm feeling like it's just bare minimum. Like, they don't get shut down by national highways because they're being roads blocked up. They don't lose the next election. I mean, sorry, this isn't big vision stuff. This is just like getting it done stuff. I think that it would be wonderful if the data does show that people have modal shift, particularly around school runs. For me, that's like by far the biggest one. I mean, it would be amazing to point to. They're expecting like a 57% rise in cycling numbers. It's really hard to work out the numbers because nobody really understands them. I showed it to Patrick Dingwood the other day, and he's like, "Oh, really? Well, we're not anticipating that in cycling infrastructure." I was like, "Okay." So I think it would be a change, a modal shift that they would like to see, and I think it would be just it working from an infrastructure point of view. This is a good time to mention that there's going to be particular points when the traffic filters are going to become more alive to people. So right now it seems quite far away because of the bridge, but about 9 months before the filters will come in, people will have to start registering. The systems will open for the permit, the free passes registration. And that's when people will start to be like, oh, I need to change my DVLA address to match my home address, all those kinds of administrative things you need to do. And it will start to become more real to people. And then the other point, so we could expect a lot of resistance around that time. And then the other point where it will start to become more real is when the signage goes up and the ANPR cameras go up, which will be about 2-3 months before the traffic filters go in. And again, it will start to feel more real. And again, we could expect like a lot of resistance. OLS doesn't have funding from my role until that point. Sadly, we only have funding until about this time next year. So we're just going to fall short before the traffic filters go in. And then the real time is going to be really hard. It's going to be when the actual filters go in, like the first day time, the first few months, because it is going to be really hard. We are asking people to change their lives quite radically in many cases. But yeah, sorry, I don't feel like I answered your question very well on what success looks like, but right now it feels like just getting it done.
Yes. I suppose it's the sort of thing is, if there was 20% fewer cars going across the city, that probably would be a qualitative difference to everybody's experience. I mean, one thing that gave me great heart was they managed to remove the parking, almost all of it, in Broad Street, and it's stunningly obvious the improvement to everybody's experience there.
Yeah.
So there are a few examples of quite radical change, and Warmford Lane and so on.
Yeah.
As you say, we just need to strengthen their resolve and reassure them that they're doing the right thing.
I mean, I've literally baked cakes and taken them to the council to the councils on bad weeks. So that kind of like resolve stuff does work. Christmas cards. But yeah, no, you're completely right. Like once people see the difference, people are like, oh. So when I say like the traffic will be like the school when schools are out, but all the time, people are like, oh. Because that's the sort of level we're talking. Like that's about 15% reduction.
Yeah,
that's a really good messaging from a messaging point of view. That's a measure that people can everyone can understand, like a difference in person. So it will be like holidays, but all the time. And that's a really simple one to explain to people.
And Dominic Furness makes the point, and I know that several people have done a lot of work on measuring air pollution. And I mean, you're quite right. I don't know, Dominic, if you want to turn it into a question at all, but it is an important legal requirement that I think it's more the City Council has to give us breathable air. Anyway, hi.
Sorry. I don't really want to make a question, but I just think it's really something that's important to measure and that's very easily communicated as well, and everyone can understand.
Yeah. Air pollution is one of the top messaging ones, alongside like sedentary lifestyles and stuff like this. I never talk about climate change ever. I never talk about emissions. I talk about people moving as part of the daily life, and I talk about air pollution, and I talk about kids getting to school by themselves and freeing up parents' times. So yeah, air pollution. Yeah, I think that's why the ZEZ is a joint city-county initiative, because the city being a special air pollution measures. But yeah, it's an important one.
Graham, I'm sorry that you've had various comments and I then didn't see your hand was up, but far away. What points would you like to get over?
A couple of points. I was a school governor many years ago when my children went through Charwell School, and we had to debate at one point, to my great disappointment, whether we should take over an extra small, less used playground for parking for teachers. The point was strongly made that many of the younger teachers on lower salaries couldn't afford to live in Oxford, full stop. You didn't acknowledge that point at all. And I think that was a huge error in the way that you delivered. I mean, these are real problems. I mean, I'm sitting pretty, you know, my house is paid for. Don't shoot me. But and the other point I wanted to make was that we were talking about quick things. When COVID came in and the emergency active travel measures, and apart from the failure of Abingdon Road, the quick ways that were marked out, we underestimate them. They are an unbelievably massive change, an unbelievably massive improvement. Removing that much parking, not all the arterials had parking on, but removing that much parking is unprecedented. I mean, this is massive. And therefore, when you're looking for things, and Broad Street's great, but Broad Street's part of the pedestrian network and not part of many other networks. But we should all get massively behind the Quickways program and seek to improve it. I mean, I'd like all of the road renewals in the future to mark out at least a Quickway width, if not wider. 2.3 meters we were looking at in the Netherlands the other week as the minimum. That's the marking them out as red, making them even more continuous. These are things that we should be doing. So you weren't very positive about Quickways, and I think you missed the finances of real employees.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, it's something I think about a lot, especially with around the hospital, and how healthcare assistants just can't afford to live anywhere near the hospital. But you're right, I didn't say it, so I will make sure I say that in the future.
Thank you. So, are there any last messages you'd like to get over? I think it's been a most wonderful summary of where we are, and I think we're all supportive. Anything take-home message you'd like to add, or any other points?
Keep going, stay involved.
Yeah.
We've got everything to play for in the next 2 years. It's vital. Like, all of your campaigning work and all of your involvement so far, like the next 2 years are like unbelievably crucial. So don't give up now, double down. Do whatever you can. If you haven't got any time, give money. If you haven't got any money, give time, like whatever, you know.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And everybody should now go and watch the Panorama program.
Oh yeah.
In which Zuhura features. So it's on iPlayer. That could be your evening activity.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you want more Oxford travel transport,
Yes.
then it is.
If you haven't had your fix. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was
Panorama.
dreadful, but it wasn't dreadful. It was all right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming along.
Okay. Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you
Bye.
very much, Zuhura.
Bye.
Bye.